Hi, I'm Carl Franklin. In the last two episodes, I showed you how to do basic authentication and authorization in both Blazor Server and Blazor WebAssembly. In this episode, I'll show you how to do auth with Azure AD B2C and add that to a Blazor Server application. Now, Azure Active Directory B2C is not Azure Active Directory.
What's the difference?
Azure AD is a way that you can authenticate and authorize the users of your enterprise for your enterprise applications. It's not for consumer-oriented applications. B2C stands for business to consumer. Azure AD B2C lets Azure store user profile information for your customers in the cloud. You can authenticate them using their own email address and password. You can authenticate them using social media providers like Google, Twitter, and Facebook. And Azure AD B2C also does multi-factor authentication via text or email. It can handle multi-tenancy. And best of all, you don't have to manage the data. And that's not only good for liability reasons, but it's good for your bottom line. I've invited back to the show my friend and fellow AppVNext developer, Joel Hulen. I'm going to configure the Blazor app, and Joel's going to walk us through configuring Azure AD B2C in the Azure portal. And that's all coming up right now, right here on Blazor Train! All right, I'm here with my good friend Joel Hulen, who, if you remember, I showed him Blazor binding for the first time, and it blew his mind. Remember that?
Yeah, I remember.
Yeah, it's very cool. So he and I are working on a project together, and the customer called for Azure AD B2C authorization. And so, this last couple of weeks we've been plowing through all that stuff, and I figured we would share the fruits of our labor with you. So what we're going to do is I've created this Azure AD B2C Blazor server application with no existing authentication because I want to show you how to add it into your existing application. And we're going to start with this little thing right here, which is you just have to have a user secret ID. And Joel, you said before that this isn't absolutely necessary, but it just shows up in the plumbing and it just has to be unique, right?
Yeah, it has to be unique. That's so if you want to store any secrets for your local development in the secret store, that's
right.
What this uses. And typically what you see there is the format, the name of the project, and the unique identifier.
Yeah,
and this is oftentimes created for you too.
Right, it's often created for you. So if we went to the authentication settings when we're creating a new project and we selected an Azure B2C resource, that would probably put that in there for us with just a GUID, right? A GUID would go here. Whoops, there's a GUID. But, so long as it's unique, that's fine. You don't really need a GUID. So this README text is in the project, as I said before, and it's sort of like your cheat sheet. It's your guide to how to add Azure AD B2C to your existing project. And we've got a few packages here that we're going to bring in. ASP.NET Core Authentication JOT Bearer, which we need to get JOT tokens. We have OpenID Connect. And then Microsoft Identity Web and Web UI. This is what's really required for Azure AD B2C, right, Joel?
Right. And also adding the redirect endpoints in your application too, which you'll see in a little bit later.
Right. So I figured that we would get the basic plumbing in the application going all the way to the app settings JSON file where all the magic strings are. And then we'll go up to Azure and we'll start configuring everything that we need in Azure and plugging those values in. And hopefully it'll work.
Knock on wood.
Back to our README. In AppRaiser, we're simply going to wrap the router in a cascading authentication state. You do not have to create this. It's built in if you've got these packages installed. So here's our app razor. There's that. And the next thing is main layout razor. We're going to add this login display right here. So that's in shared main layout razor, a little login display so we know if we're logged in or not, and it has the register link and the logout link and all that. Let's actually create that now, login display. It's a razor component. And I got that right here. All right, so we have an authorized view. You should know what that is by now. And we have this can edit profile, which we're pulling out from the options here, Microsoft Identity options. And essentially, we're saying if we're logged in, then hello, user identity name. And if we can edit, we have a link to the edit profile. And if we can't, it's just going to say hello. And then we have a log out. But if we're not logged in, we get a link to sign in. Simple. Okay, now we have to add some plumbing to startup. So let's start with our using statements. And then we've got 3 services to add. I'll talk about those in a second here. Let me get them in. All right, so we're adding authentication and authorization and adding controllers with views with Microsoft Identity UI. This is just the plumbing that's required in order to do what we want to do here. One thing that you might find interesting right here is we're using configuration get section Azure AD B2C. We haven't set that up yet, but we will. So OpenID Connect is a sort of a standard for claims and things like that, isn't it? So that this is what Azure AD B2C uses. And so we're just telling it that we're going to use the Microsoft Identity Web App configuration scheme or authentication scheme, and all the details of that we're going to pull out of this configuration file with that section.
Right. That'll pull from the configuration file, the app settings.json locally. However, when we deploy this into Azure, what'll happen is the way we name the configurations there will match the hierarchy within the app settings, where you have the Azure AD B2C section, and then you have all the sub properties. We'll show you how to mimic that structure within your app settings in Azure.
Right. All right, let's move on. And now we've got another one here. Services, add server-side Blazor with Microsoft Identity Consent Handler. The heck is a consent handler?
So what that is, is it depends on the type of information that you want to request from the user. For instance, you might request having access to their entire profile, or maybe their address within their profile. And when you do that, then what'll happen is that the user, when they sign in for the first time, will get a prompt that says, do you consent sharing this information? And they have to click yes for us to be able to get that.
Right. You must share your information.
That's right. Or we won't let you log in. So it's as simple as that.
Right.
It's kind of like accepting the EULA.
Right. Yeah. No, I do not accept the EULA. Then you can go.
No, you cannot use my app.
Right. All right. So now in down here in the configure section, there's a couple of settings we need to go right after use routing, and it's just use authentication and use authorization. Oh, and by the way, I do apologize. I have some errata. Last week, I confused the terms authentication and authorization twice in Blazor Train. But here's the thing, you know, if it gets by me and it gets by the final editor and it goes public, if we want to change it on YouTube, we have to upload a completely different video, change the URL, and now everybody's like, where is everything? So sorry, I just apologize for that.
That's why you always just use the shorthand auth. Then you're covered either way.
That's right. I like that. All right, so we're putting this guy, map controllers, in the middle of map Blazor hub and map fallback to page. All right, so now we're getting to our app settings JSON file, and here's where the magic strings are. And something we should say about magic strings is that it's not like these magic settings are going to allow any old application that has them to be authenticated. Right, we're putting in the bare minimum that we need, and what we're going to do is store the real secrets in Azure Key Vault, right?
Correct.
Okay. But this is the bare minimum that we need. We need an instance, a client ID, a callback path, which is sort of a standard, a domain, a signed out callback path, which we're not actually using right now, but it just has to be in there starting with a /. A sign up, sign in policy ID, which we'll create, reset password policy ID, which we'll create, edit profile policy ID, which we can also create or not, and then a client secret. Now, the client secret isn't really a password that anybody who has it can use the application. Is that right? You still have to be authenticated by Azure B2C in order to be able to pass that in to get the JOT claims, right?
You have to be authenticated. You also need to have the referring path that it's coming from be registered within the authentication settings for your Azure Active Directory B2C application.
Right.
And so if you're not, if it's coming from some other web app that's deployed to a completely different domain that's not registered, then it's going to totally ignore everything anyway.
Right. So I guess what we're saying is, don't worry about letting this stuff go into your GitHub repo. It's all completely benign, and nobody can steal your application and do all the stuff without your actual password that you use to log in.
Right.
All right.
But best practice dictates don't have all this stuff exposed anywhere. And that's what that client or that secret path setting that you were setting up for your secrets profile is for. And for the sake of simplicity, we're not going to use that. We'll just store it here in the app settings, but we'll show you how to protect that within Azure.
All right, cool. So this is all that we need in the application right now. Let me flip over to Azure. And we're going to start by, now I've got this brandy new Blazor train at appvnext.com Azure account with my free $200. I mean, I literally just set it up because I want to start fresh. And we're going to create a tenant, first of all, right? And tenants are, if you go to this filter, the directories, and you can see here's one that we created before. But if you have multiple tenants, those aren't tenants as in customers. Those are Azure tenants that are essentially directories within your Azure account, right?
Correct.
All right, so we're going to go create a resource, and I'll just search for B2C. And this is where we're going to start. We're going to create an Azure Active Directory B2C. Now, we don't have tenants, a new tenant. We don't have a new resource group. But this is what we have to do first. Create a new Azure AD B2C tenant. And we have our organization name, and I'll just call this BT for Blazor Train, B to C. That's fine. The domain name.
It looks like a Star Wars droid character.
It does. It's a droid designation. Blazor Train B2C. How about that? All right. Okay. You just need to have something that's unique, and it's going to tell you if it's not unique with these little green check boxes. So we'll review and create that. Here's my review. Looks good. Create it. And now we wait. Tick tock, tick tock, tick tock, tick tock. Hey, it created the tenant. So what do we do now?
Okay, see that link in the breadcrumb there? It says create new B2C tenant or link to existing tenant. Click on that.
Aha.
Now we want to link this one that second option. Last time we chose that first option to create the tenant.
Right.
Now that we created that tenant, we want to link it to our Azure subscription, which
All
is in a
right.
different tenant.
Yep. So here it is, Blazor Train B2C. And I only have one subscription here. And we're going to create a new resource group called Blazor Train B2C. I don't know. It just came to me.
That, you're just a fount of creativity.
Isn't this one of the issues with programmers is when it comes, people leave us in charge of naming things a lot
Oh,
of
that's the
times.
hardest thing.
It is the
That and
hardest
working with
thing.
date and times. Date time conversions and naming things are like two of your biggest challenges.
Anybody who's listened to .NET Rocks knows I hate date times, and I had to struggle with that stuff today too.
Oh.
All right. Anyway, what's next, Joel?
Okay, let's go to the tenant. Actually, let's go to the resource group and see where it shows up there.
There it is. There's our B2C tenant.
Yep, that's our resource. And this is where we go to start configuring it. We want to go to the Azure AD B2C settings because there's a few things that we need to do now.
And we're going to go down this list, aren't we?
Yeah. So I guess what we should do is talk about this a little bit while we're on the screen.
Okay.
So first of all, you mentioned the fact already that we have a customer that we're working with who wanted authentication.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't really know they wanted B2C. They knew they wanted authentication, but they also knew that they wanted to limit their security footprint and what they're liable for.
Right.
And so, if you're going with your standard out-of-the-box authentication, typically what you're doing is you're storing user credentials and user profile information in your own database.
Right.
And when you do that, now you're the one responsible for if any of that information leaks. You're also responsible for trying to figure out if people are trying to hack those accounts, or maybe they do get hold of an account and now they're doing some suspicious things like connecting from different countries within hours of each other.
Right.
These are all different things that Azure Active Directory and Active Directory B2C are meant to do. And when you create an Azure subscription, you have an Azure Active Directory account. Right. But if you have customers that you want to create accounts for them, but you don't want to add them to your enterprise or add them to your Active Directory user list, then you use B2C, and B2C has those security features that detects those problems. It also stores all of the credentials. It handles managing users' passwords. You don't know what their passwords are. And it also allows you to have users manage their own stuff, like reset their passwords, update their profiles. You don't have to create all the user interface for those things. Right. And so that's why we recommended this.
And you also get stuff like two-factor authentication. It's just built in. It's just a switch, and they handle everything.
Right. Multi-factor with an SMS message or email message that's built in.
And even though we're not going to get into it today, multi-tenancy is supported. And maybe on another Blazor train, we'll show you how we handled that.
Yep, multi-tenancy and identity profile are providers. So if you want people to use social logins like Facebook or Google or something like that, you can hook those in, and then those become part of the auth options for them to sign in. Right. We're just going to do email and password for now. But what do we need to do first?
We need to register an application.
There you go. Good job. Yeah. Gold star to Carl. You want to go to app registration and new registration. Yep.
Right.
And let's give this a name.
Let's call it Blazor AD B2C. I don't know.
Sure.
It just, I'm a font of creativity once again. All right. So these supported account types, this is something that can be confusing for people. So let's break this down here.
Okay. The default option is the one that you want to go with most of the time, which is that bottom one. So accounts in any identity provider or organizational directory uh, are supported.
So in other words, these are constraints.
Yeah, for our purposes, we want to allow for any identity profile or provider. And this redirect URI, which is recommended,
Oh, right.
this is this is what I was talking about earlier, where you have to have the paths. These are, think of these as like the referrers that need to show up. And so when you sign in, so what are you signing in from? Well, it's my local host, it's my own domain name for my deployed application,
Right.
and this is the redirect after they authenticate into Azure Active Directory B2C. It goes back here. Now,
Right.
if they're trying to authenticate to Azure Active Directory B2C and they're not listed in this redirect URI list, then
Nothing works.
yeah, exactly. So
Right.
let's just start out simple. We have to have something. So let's do, jwt.ms. So what this is it's a Microsoft owned resource where you can take your token and paste it into this form on this page, and then it will show you all of the claims information within that token, like all of
Right.
the properties.
So until we get our application running, when we can add our own URLs and stuff, we'll just use this as a default so we can test it.
Yep, and we'll add more.
All right, so now I'm like right in front of the register button. Here you can see it right there.
Yeah, but we want to check that box there. See, grant permissions to OpenID
Yeah.
and offline access permissions.
Right.
That means your organization, your admins will have access to those.
Okay.
All right, so we've got our application.
Yep.
There's one piece of information that we need here, and that's the application ID.
Yes.
And that goes into our app settings.
Right there, client ID.
Client ID. Yep.
So where do we find the instance information and the domain?
Okay, so we need to go to the Azure Active Directory B2C tenant. So you do that by clicking on that link, maybe do that in a new tab, so we don't have to keep navigating so much. And so you can see it in two places. It's underneath the name at the top left, and it's there in domain name. So the domain name is right there. You can paste that there. And the other one is the instance. And the instance is a little bit different. You're not going to see that here. So go back to your settings in Visual Studio.
Oh. Okay.
Okay, so in the instance, see the first part of the domain, the subdomain, you're going to reuse that part of it, just the Blazor train B2C, right? And then what you want to put in there is https:// then paste that .b2clogin.com.
Nice.
And that's the instance.
All right, so we're working our way down here. Let's go back and see what else we have to do.
Okay, so go back to the other tab with our app.
Yeah.
And then let's go to authentication on the left.
All right.
And this is where we can add our additional redirect URIs. So we're going to, so this is where we'll add the local host one with the SSL port that we're using.
So let's find that. I know how to find that. Properties, launch settings, JSON, SSL port. And so it's funny that even though you're using this locally, it's still going to call into Blazor, into Azure AD B2C, and it's got to come back. So basically our app is saying, here's my URL. It's http://localhost, something that's not routable at all. And then there's more to this, right?
Yeah. So it's going to be sign in dash OIDC.
Okay.
And look at the app settings again.
Let me save that.
Yeah. So in Visual Studio.
Here's my app settings.
There it is.
There it is, right
Yep.
there.
So that callback path there, sign in OIDC, that's where we got that from. We didn't just make it up. That's the default. There, you can change it to other things, but that's the standard, and we'll go with that. What we'll want to do too is once we deploy this to Azure, we're going to want to register that path as well. But for now, this is enough for us to get started locally.
Right.
And logout URL, we'll just ignore that for now. This implicit grant, we'll want to check both of these. Even though in the notes above that says the ID token is needed for ASP.NET Core web apps, we found that we actually had to have both of these checked for us to successfully use this.
Yep. It's one of those things that we don't really know why, but this is what we had to do.
Let our pain be your gain.
Yeah.
Okay, and that bottom one
is an interesting one.
Enable. Yeah, we don't need to enable public client flows. That's if you're doing like a local desktop application development or like a native mobile app, and you want to be able to do a flow from there. And we'll talk about what flows are next. But we're doing all our authentication behind an API to handle a server, so the client doesn't know anything about authentication. It's just getting tokens and passing them back and forth, right? Right.
Yeah.
And let's go to certificates and secrets.
Okay.
Okay, and we want to create a client secret at the bottom there.
Yeah.
And the client secret is what allows us to interface with Microsoft Graph. And Graph is basically the web-based services that you can call that's part of Active Directory. So Azure Active Directory and Azure Active Directory B2C for being able to get to the profile information if we need it, for being able to, if you want to do things like create user accounts or modify user accounts on the behalf of a user, that's another thing. Just do like, you can say key. It doesn't matter the name, but key is fine. And when it expires, let's do 1 year. That's fine.
Okay.
And add that.
I didn't understand that.
You hear that? That's my watch. My watch is listening to me.
Siri, delete my account.
Okay. Yeah, and the other thing too that this client secret allows us to do is it allows us to exchange an authorization code for an access token. And so what that means is when you authorize a person, once they authenticate, if you want to be able to retrieve their access token, you need this client key. And so let's copy this value.
So in other words, you can't get the claims, like whatever their claims are, unless you pass in this client secret, but you also have to be authenticated. So it's not like a password,
right,
so to speak.
It's something that you want to keep protected. I mean, we're going to add it here to our app settings just for ease right now, but
But we could put this in Key Vault, I think.
Yeah, I was going to say this is a good time to bring up Key Vault.
Okay.
So let's go to the portal and let's go back to our resource group.
Okay.
And let's add a resource. Click add up there at the top and just search Key Vault.
There it is. So everybody should use Key Vault, and here's why. It's cheap, and it lets you remove your secrets from your application in your settings and all that stuff. It goes into a GitHub repo, and it's public knowledge for all those people who actually have access to your repo. So, and it's extremely cheap, as I said before.
Yeah, and so the thing about Key Vault is if you have any secrets, if you have connection strings, if you have keys like we just copied, anything that you don't want to leak, keep it in Key Vault. It's the most secure way to keep those secrets in Azure. And the other thing too is that we can use things like system managed identities where say we'll have our web app that we deploy to.
Mm-hmm.
And how do you connect to Key Vault? Well, you have to have a key to access Key Vault. But then if you're storing
Right.
that key in your app settings, well, now people can get to that key and then, be able to authenticate to Key Vault. So there's system managed identities, which means this is a system managed account that goes to Azure Active Directory that Microsoft manages for you. You don't know the password or anything, but it creates an identity for that application. Then you set an
Right.
access policy for that application to access your keys. And
Yes.
so now you don't even store any secrets about how to connect to Key Vault. All that's
Right.
done behind the scenes through access policies.
That's nice. So the application gets the keys.
Right. There's no leakage of secrets. Exactly. Yeah. So let's give it a name. We're adding it to our
All
resource
right.
group. That's
We got a
fine.
subscription. We got our resource
Yep.
group. Let's give it a name. Let's call it Blazor Key Vault. That's fine.
Again with the names.
Oh, it's already
in
used.
use.
Okay. Blazor Key Vault 2.
Oh wow.
I know.
You are a master.
I'm so brilliant sometimes.
Mhm.
All right. So standard pricing tier, I guess.
Standard's
there's,
all we
you know,
need. Yeah. Exactly. We don't need HSM back keys, so we don't need the premium tier. So
Okay.
you have everything you need. Let's
All right.
review and create.
Sounds good.
This is also the service you can store certificates as well. So
Right.
if you have your SSL, TLS certificates, you could store them in here and manage the life cycle of them. There's a lot you could do. I mean, I use this by default for anything that I deploy to Azure.
All right. So what's next, Joel?
Click on Go to Resource, and we'll just add a secret real quick. Go to Secrets on the
Okay.
left-hand side and Generate Import. And now we just need to give it a name. So this is for the client secret, right? So we can call
Okay.
it B2C client secret, right? And then just paste
Sounds
the
good.
value
And the value we have
right there. Yep.
easily handy right there.
And that's
Okay.
it. We don't have to specify anything else. You can set an expiration date if you want to roll over secrets, but
All right. There's a create button under me. I'm just going to press it.
yep. So that's already created. This is
right.
also where we would create secrets for, say, a connection string to SQL database or something else.
Sure. Just
So,
about anything, any kind of key.
yep. All right. So that's it for Key Vault. And now let's go
All right.
back to the third tab there.
Okay.
Yep. What we want to do now is let's look at user attributes before we create
Yeah.
flow. And let's create a custom attribute. And so these attributes are things that are part of the user's profile.
Right.
And if you want to have a custom attribute, like let's create one for favorite color.
I like that.
Fab color. Favorite color.
Fab.
So we can choose from string, Boolean, and numeric types.
Some stupid description that obviously doesn't help, but it's there nonetheless.
Yep.
All right.
All right, so we've got that. Now, scroll down on the left-hand menu there. We want to go to user flows. This is the key to allowing people to sign in and to sign up and to manage their profiles.
So new user flow.
Yep.
And yet you can see there's a whole bunch of things here.
Exactly. So notice that on the left-hand side, there's sign up and sign in, and then just sign up. If you want to allow users to register their own account, you want that first one, sign up and sign in. Otherwise, just sign up. So we'll do sign up and sign in.
Okay.
and we'll go with the recommended newest version. And that
Woo!
didn't help at all. You want to go the other way.
Thanks. Yeah, it's true.
There was a
All
button
right.
there that you have to click. So now all we have to do at the top here is provide a name. So let's just call it sign up _ sign in.
Sign up, sign in.
Okay. Now we only have one identity provider, which is the default an email sign up. If we set up Facebook or Google and those
I
other
see.
providers, they would show up here. Now, this multi-factor authentication is when they get contacted to here's your key, your secret that you have to put in, copy and paste. You want to go through a text and phone call option or via email. So we'll just keep that as SMS. Now, the enforcement here is if you put it on always on, then multi-factor is always enabled for everyone. That's why the recommended is conditional. So this means that you can have a conditional access policy to make the decision as to whether we enable multi-factor authentication. And so this means that when we create this policy, we can apply it to this application, all of the applications. And so because we don't want to be forcing people to use MFA all the time right now, we'll just leave it at conditional.
Okay.
Scroll down. So those two columns, collect attribute means this is something when they sign up, or if they edit their profile, this will show up on the form.
Okay.
Return claim means that when you get that token back that contains the claims in it or properties, you will have these that are part of that token. So the nice thing about that is if somebody is authenticated and they hit any endpoint within your application, you can extract that information from that token. So it's basically that user profile. So let's do given name, which is first name, surname, which is last name. Let's do email address. Click on show more underneath there. Now we're both.
Oh, great. Now it's on the other side of the screen.
There's favorite color.
Oh, yeah. Favorite color. Where is that? There it is.
Right there.
Yeah, let's get that.
Do both for that.
Oh, an email address. We can return that.
Email addresses. Yes, we can return that one.
Yeah.
And display name. We want the display name. If we don't do display name, then our code that says hello Carl Franklin or whatever won't work because it's returning the display name.
Okay, and now I'm right over the OK button.
But there's an OK button there.
There is an OK button.
The button that looks like Carl, just click on that one.
There's another one behind me that says user's object ID, and you can return that to get like a unique identifier for the user, which you might want to store, whatever, if you need
Which is what we're doing in this project that we're working on.
Right.
Because we're creating a database record for user activity, and so it has that unique ID for them.
All right, so I'll click OK.
Okay.
And now we can create. I'm always in the way, Joel Hulen.
I know. You probably hear that Kelly all the time.
All right, so now we have a sign up, sign in user flow. Is there another one that we need?
Yeah, let's do a reset password one.
Okay.
Or password reset.
Recommended?
Yep.
And
just call it password reset.
Password _ reset. How's that?
Okay.
Then reset using email address.
Yep.
MFA, same as before.
Yep.
Now,
and we
don't need claims here?
No.
Yeah. I didn't think so.
All right. So we have 2 user flows.
So now these are magic strings that go in our config, right?
Exactly. So we want to copy those into our config.
Oops. Here's password reset. which is this policy ID. And then we have sign up, sign in, which is this one. And if we made an edit profile policy user flow, we would put that one right here, right?
Exactly.
But do we need to?
We don't have to. It's not required.
No.
Do we
All
want
right.
to? Maybe.
I don't know. Well, you follow the same strategy.
Right.
So it looks like I can run this now.
I think so. I think we collected everything.
Okay. Let's see what happens.
Let's try your hypothesis.
Yes. I put myself back on the left, Joel.
All right. Perfect. This is taking its sweet time, isn't it?
It sure is.
But you can see here it redirected us to the B2C login.
Just doesn't seem to be happening here for some reason.
Let's
just
look
double
at
check. Yeah, let's look at our data here.
Yeah, the path for your application, and then authentication. Okay, local host. Oh, it's not HTTPS. You did HTTP.
Oh, dude.
Jeez. See,
Wow.
that's an example. If it's not right, it's just going to sit there and ignore you.
That's right. There's the problem right there. Okay, so we'll save that and give it another shot. Good call, man.
Give it a whirl, man.
And that's obviously the problem because it got there. It was just trying to come back and it couldn't.
Couldn't.
All right, so I can't sign in because I don't have an account. So I'll click sign up now.
Yep.
And look at this. It's asking me for my favorite color and everything. But this is a little strange because, first of all, these fields you can actually enter, but you can't do anything with them. So they shouldn't even be here if you ask me.
I know. I agree. Now, to that point, you can, in Azure Active Directory B2C, in the application settings, there is an option to create custom login pages.
Right.
And you could do it in Razor page format too, which is cool.
Awesome. All right, so I've got my email in here. I'm going to send the verification code. And now I'll go get it. Copy and paste from my email. There it is. Here's my verify code. All right, and now I can select a password, and I'll just select a very, very secure password. So my display name will just be like Carl. That's fine. My favorite color, of course, is going to be Azure. My first name, Carl. Last name, Franklin. I mean, come on. That's like a meatball right there. So now I'm creating it, and look at this. It even logged me in. Hello, Carl. Right? So now if I log out, this is a weird thing. I would think it would take me back to like the login screen, like the main page right here.
Yeah, there's a couple more steps we would need to do in order to do that, but
yeah,
I think this is good. You know, it's pulling your so Carl, that's pulling out. Hello, Carl. That's actually from your display name. If you go to your code, let's look at the code for that page.
Yeah, right. So that's in the login display, and it's user identity name.
Yeah, so that user.identity, so that's the identity principal, and then the dot name will pull from that display name field. That's why we included it, because if you don't include display name and they don't put anything in there, it'll just say blank.
Say hello space.
Yeah. So then your options are you can extract that information from the claims in that token. Right. And then you can say, okay, let me grab the first name field value or the last name or however you want to do it. But it takes a little bit more code to do that.
And also you don't have those things here. You need to, like you said, add some more code to do that.
Right.
Another thing I want to touch on before we wrap it up here is that roles are sort of an outdated idea with Azure B2C, and it's all about claims and scopes, and so we're not going to touch that right now. I think I heard somewhere that you can use Azure Active Directory roles, but then
You can.
you're mixing your AD stuff with their, B2C stuff.
Well, you have roles in Azure Active Directory, and so that's more for if you're doing role-based access controls or RBAC,
Yeah.
and it's an enterprise type of application.
Right.
You're doing role-based access either for your application or say your file system. You have ADLS Gen 2, Azure Data Lake Storage Gen 2, which has a hierarchical file system. You could say, hey, only people in these roles can access these files, or another area within Azure. With B2C, there's no real role type anymore. And really the replacement for that, and you hit the nail on the head, is claims.
Right.
And you could do it just simply by assigning claims to people. So then you could have a claims filter. It says user has claims, blah, 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 so who can access this as claims this, and this. So it's a little bit different. And I think that's something we could do in a future episode.
It's also a little more accurate because role, like I did in the last 2 episodes, I had if user is in role, can, push counter button or can see counter button. That's not really a role. It's really a claim.
Yeah, that's a functional role that you're creating from their user roles.
Yeah.
You could also use scopes, and scopes are kind of used at the application level. Like, for instance, if you're creating API endpoints and you have different classes of devices or applications that are connecting to it, those applications might connect to a scope. And the scope might be, hey, you're allowed to read all, or you're allowed to read X, Y, and Z. And so from that application, you're getting the access token against that scope. And then so now your API, when it gets that token in, can say, yeah, you are in this scope. And so I'll allow you to do that. So that's a different layer, but that's more at an application level layer versus.
So we have more options for authorization,
right?
Certainly than we can talk about now. But for now, Joel, this has been great, and it's been great working with you on this project. And I'm glad we got to share our brain droppings with the passengers.
Brain droppings.
Yeah.
Me too.
All right, now back to you in the studio, Carl. So now you've got a new skill. You can take an existing Blazor application and wire it up to Azure AD B2C. Once I tried to wire up Alexa to my coffee maker.
Sorry, I don't know that.
She sent me 500 pounds of Sumatra beans. Hey, thanks for riding the rails with me today. This is where I jump off. I'll see you next time. Blaze a train!